Harris is about to face off against Donald Trump in the coming presidential election. This leads to one big question. Who is her vice president going to be? With Biden stepping down, being the first incumbent president to not run for re-election since 1968, this is a very major decision. And I have 5 people who I think are going to be leading the ticket against Donald Trump and J.D. Vance in the upcoming election. The first person I'm going to be talking about is Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. Now, Shapiro is the least likely of the 5 to take the vice presidential seat, and I say that for many reasons. He's a newly elected governor, and while J.D. Vance is a newly elected senator, I don't think that discounts him entirely from the potential pick. I do, however, think that ultimately he won't go for it. Shapiro has made numerous statements in the past stating how much he dislikes serving in the legislative branch. And while the vice president is a mixture of the executive and legislative branch, he would mostly serve his time as the president of the Senate. Furthermore, I think he understands the risk this has to his reputation, as he is a fairly popular governor of Pennsylvania right now, uniting both Republicans and Democrats. I mean, even I like Governor Josh Shapiro, I'm not going to lie. However, I think if he steps into this race, he risks his reputation. And I don't think he can win it, even if Harris does pick him, to be very mild, if that. And ultimately, I don't think he's going to go for it. But I am going to show the map of his benefits to the campaign if he decides to actually be Harris's VP. Shapiro would obviously have a lot of appeal in the East, probably being the only reason that Harris would get over the line in Pennsylvania if she wins the state, which at this moment is very unlikely. Now, I think he's a solid vice presidential pick and presidential pick. However, I don't think he can win at this time, or he's going to go out there and try for it. And I have heard some people say that him being Jewish would potentially hurt him. However, I don't see that really being a major issue compared to another person I'm going to talk about later on in this video, and their sort of identity. Now, I don't think the Jewish thing would hurt him, but that's just my opinion. It could, and I don't really think that matters personally to a lot of voters. So honestly, if Harris wants to have a chance at winning, she would pick Shapiro. The rest of these guys honestly are not going to carry her across the picket line, but potentially they could. Anyways, let's move on to the next guy. Now, Biden Cabinet Secretary Pete Buttigieg previously ran in the 2020 nomination for the Democratic Party to get the presidency. He has not served any other office prior to being Secretary of Transportation other than being mayor of Steuben, Indiana. And I honestly don't see this pick as likely at all. I mean, he is a Biden secretary, and the last time a secretary was chosen as a vice president, it was really for no other reason than experience reasons, and she's already the serving vice president, so there's no really reason to pick Pete Buttigieg. Plus, I do think him being gay would negatively affect the election for the Democrats, and I'll show you what I mean in just a second. Obviously, I think, a gay guy being on the ticket in the South would not go over well at all. It would definitely not go over well with Hispanic or black voters. And, that's just unfortunate for what it is. But that is what it is at the same time. I do have him going down in Ohio and West Virginia and Pennsylvania and possibly even New York. I don't really see a lot of these, low propensity minority voters who are, more on the conservative and Christian side going out to vote for Pete Buttigieg. It would be an absolute disaster. I didn't put New Mexico or Arizona in the red column for negatively affecting Harris, although I certainly think there's a case for that, especially with Nevada too. I do think he would consolidate the Democratic base and get the more, white suburbanites who still vote Democrat out to vote. But other than that, I don't think he's a good vice presidential pick at all. All right, next we have Mark Kelly, who would be the J.D. Vance type pick for the Democrats, being that he is, a more recently elected senator. He has served since 2020, so he does have 4 years of experience under his belt. He won a special election, and then he won a seat outright in 2022. So I definitely think, he is more experienced in that thing, and he is one of the picks from the Sun Belt. But I don't think the Sun Belt is winnable, and I certainly don't think Harris has a winning shot in Arizona at this time. I would definitely say Kelly would be a good pick. He would not hurt the base, but he wouldn't substantially help it either. But it would be a very bad idea for them to pick this seat because, in the event of a special election, I could honestly see this flipping Republican, given that Arizona is basically almost out of the margin of error for the Republicans in this cycle, at least for Donald Trump. So I think Kelly would be a good pick. Let's go to the map. I have Kelly obviously helping in the Sun Belt and obviously helping in Arizona. But other than that, he doesn't bring much to the ticket. And if Harris wants to win, she's going to need someone to help her bring herself above the picket line in a place like the Rust Belt because she's going to suffer horrendously there. And it's not even going to be funny to watch. I mean, personally, as a person who's rooting for Donald Trump to win this election, I'm glad that Harris is going to be the nominee simply because that just locks down the Rust Belt. And she's probably not going to win Georgia or Arizona or make any substantial gains in the state. I mean, there was a poll just out of Georgia the other day that had Trump above 50% against Harris, and that's a disaster waiting to happen if you go up against him. All right, here I have my fourth pick, which would be North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper. Now, Roy Cooper is a moderate. I do think he'd have some Southern appeal. However, I think it's unlikely they run him. And I definitely see the case because for him politically, he's a sitting duck politician. He's not going to do anything for the rest of his term. He's really just going to set the next 2 years out, or I mean, actually, rather than just this year out and not really perform well. He did win re-election when Trump also won the state of North Carolina in 2020. So I don't necessarily think he's going to help Harris win North Carolina. But I also think it's unlikely that he does because if they run him now, the Democrats can't reasonably run him in 2026 for the North Carolina Senate seat. And if they're expected to lose a lot of Senate seats, especially with the Trump victory, they're going to want to play their cards right. So having Roy Cooper be the nominee and just wasting his name potential and making him far more partisan than he is a horrible idea, especially if you're needing to pick up some Senate seats after this cycle. Granted that even if Biden or Harris wins, that Republicans are still going to be at least at 51 Senate seats, and there's not many more seats to pick up, especially since I doubt Susan Collins is going to lose re-election in the next cycle, but I digress. Now let's bring you guys to the map. Cooper would moderately help in the Sun Belt and the South, and that's really the only plus I'd give him. He's pretty unremarkable in most regards, so I wouldn't necessarily pick him for VP. I don't think he would give the campaign the edge, given that this is a presidential race, not a vice presidential race. And I honestly think, like, so far, every single one of these candidates, with the exception of Josh Shapiro, would probably lose a debate against J.D. Vance. So let's bring to the final guy, and the guy who I personally think Harris is most likely to pick as VP, other than Roy Cooper. Now, I think Andy Beshear is a decent vice presidential pick that would sort of egg off the gains that Trump made with picking J.D. Vance in Appalachia. Not saying at all that I think, Trump's gains with Appalachian voters due to picking Vance is going to disintegrate, especially with Andy Beshear. His skeletons are going to come out of the closet. They're going to realize he's definitely more liberal than he leads on to be, definitely less blue dog than he likes to advertise himself as. But I think she's probably going to pick him, and I think he'd probably accept it. Likely because he has no political future after this, and he probably understands that Harris isn't going to win. But on the off chance that he does, well, I think he would definitely serve as vice president then. And I mean, he just got reelected. He can just sit out the rest of his term and enjoy a political lame duck section again, or he could be the vice president. So it's a decent risk on his part. I don't think it's going to hurt his popularity. And, like I said, I think it would definitely help Harris in, the eastern part of Pennsylvania, although not drastically to where I'd say that Pennsylvania would become like more Democrat than the polls are suggesting it isn't now. So let me bring you guys to the map real quick. All right, as you guys can see, I think Andy Beshear would bring moderate, very moderate support over to Kamala Harris. I don't think any of these states that I highlighted in blue would drastically shift in my model from now to then, simply if she picks Andy Beshear. But yeah. All right, guys, so this is the end of my video. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And if you could please hit the bell notification and keep up with you guys. And I would like to remind you, I have my governor video that I'm working on. It's taking a little bit more time than I expected it to, but that's because I want it to be solid. I want there to be effort in it. And, you know, I'm just excited to make it. And I hope you guys do enjoy it when it comes out. But like I said, please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and enjoy the rest of your day, folks.